thought by itself is like a shadow cast on a wall, fleeting, weightless, incapable of action. It appears, lingers momentarily, and vanishes without leaving a trace. And yet, we spend our entire lives building identities, relationships, and even suffering upon these ephemeral wraiths of the mind. If we say, "I am thinking," who exactly is thinking? If we claim, "I am annoyed by my thoughts," who is it that is annoyed? The more closely we examine this I, the more it dissolves, revealing itself to be just another thought. An illusion that sustains itself only through unquestioned belief. Imagine a puppet show where the marionettes appear to dance and speak. If someone were to enter the room without seeing the strings or the puppeteer, they might believe these wooden figures are acting of their own accord. But if they investigate, if they follow the strings upward, they will discover that the entire show is an illusion, a trick of perception. The same applies to the I thought. It appears to move, to make choices, to suffer, and to react. But upon investigation, we find that it has no independent existence. It is merely another appearance in consciousness, just like every other thought. Consider the act of breathing. We often say, "I am breathing," but what part of this I is actually engaged in the process? The lungs expand and contract, the oxygen is absorbed into the blood, the diaphragm moves. All of it happens effortlessly, without the involvement of any thinker. The same applies to thoughts. They arise and pass away like waves on the ocean, but no wave can claim ownership of the ocean itself. When a thought says, "I am sad," it is simply one transient ripple among an infinite sea of mental activity. There is no thinker behind the thought, no separate entity pulling the strings. Now, if this I is just a thought, can a thought actually do anything? Take a moment and consider, can a thought lift a cup? Can a thought walk down the street? Can a thought make a decision? The answer, of course, is no. What we call action happens naturally, effortlessly, without the need for an internal commander issuing orders. The belief that I am the doer is just another assumption that has never been truly examined. It is like a child drawing a steering wheel on a piece of paper and pretending to drive a car. The mind creates the illusion of control, but in reality, everything unfolds on its own. The key to unraveling this illusion is inquiry, not intellectual inquiry, where one thought chases another in an endless loop, but direct, immediate observation. Ask yourself, who is aware of this thought? When a thought arises, such as "I am thinking," turn inward and look for the one who thinks. Do you find an entity, a tangible presence behind the thought? Or is there just the thought itself, floating momentarily before disappearing into nothing? If the I is merely another thought, how can it be the one experiencing? How can it be the one acting? This investigation is not an abstract exercise, it is the key to freedom. The separate self, the personal I, survives only because it is never questioned. It is like a shadow that appears real until one looks directly at it. The moment one clearly sees that this I has no substance, that it is nothing more than an idea, its grip is loosened, and with it, all the suffering that comes from believing in its reality. Imagine you are watching a movie and become deeply immersed in the story. You laugh when the characters laugh. You feel tension when danger arises, and you may even cry at the emotional moments. But at any time, you can shift your awareness and remember, this is just a movie. None of it is actually happening. The illusion does not need to be fought or destroyed. It simply needs to be recognized as an illusion. The same is true for the I thought. If this I is absent, what remains? The answer is simple yet profound: presence. Not the presence of a person or an individual, but the simple, undeniable reality of being. This presence was here before the I thought arose, and it remains when the thought disappears. It is like the sky, vast and open, while thoughts are passing clouds, appearing and disappearing, but never altering the sky itself. In this presence, there is no need to cling to thoughts, no need to identify with a separate self, and no need to struggle against anything. The irony is that nothing actually changes except the false assumption that a separate I was ever in control. The body still moves, thoughts still arise, emotions still come and go, but without the illusion of an individual self to claim ownership over them. This is what it means to transcend the I. It does not mean eradicating thoughts or trying to force the mind into silence. It simply means recognizing thoughts for what they are: empty, weightless, incapable of doing anything. Try a simple experiment. Stop for a moment and see if you can find a shape, a size, or a location for this I without resorting to thought. If you do not think about yourself, does I have any substance? Or is it simply an idea that appears when thought labels experience? Just as a dream character seems real while one is dreaming, but is seen as illusory upon waking, so too does the personal self seem real until it is examined. The moment it is seen through, it falls away like a discarded mask. And yet, the mind resists this seeing. It clings to the belief in an individual self because it has built its entire world upon it. To acknowledge that the I is just a thought is to shake the foundation of everything one has ever known. But rather than being terrifying, this realization is liberating. It is like discovering that a long-standing fear was based on nothing more than a misunderstanding. The moment the illusion is seen, its power disappears. Imagine a man walking in the dark who suddenly sees a coiled rope on the ground. His heart races, he leaps back, convinced that he has encountered a deadly snake. Panic floods his body, but then in the light of a passing car, he sees it clearly. It was just a rope all along. His fear vanishes in an instant, not because he destroyed the rope, but because he saw what it truly was. In the same way, the illusion of a separate I is dispelled the moment it is recognized for what it is. What remains is a profound simplicity. Life continues, but without the unnecessary weight of a false self dragging it down. There is no longer a doer, but action still happens. There is no longer a thinker, but thoughts still arise. Everything continues just as before, yet everything is transformed. The river still flows, but there is no longer a belief that any single wave is separate from the whole. This is the beauty of self-inquiry. It is not about gaining something new, but about seeing through what was never real to begin with. It is not about creating silence, but about recognizing that silence was always present beneath the noise. It is not about getting rid of thoughts, but about realizing that thoughts never had any power in the first place. So the next time a thought arises claiming ownership, I am thinking, I am suffering, I must figure this out, pause and look. See if this I has any substance, any existence outside of the thought itself. If it does not, then what remains is freedom. Not a personal freedom, but the effortless freedom of being itself. And in that there is peace beyond anything the mind could ever comprehend. If the I is only a thought, then what does that mean for everything else we assume to be true? If I does not exist as a separate entity, then who is it that suffers? Who is it that desires? Who is it that fears? The entire structure of human identity is built upon a phantom, and yet despite its illusory nature, this phantom dictates the course of our lives until it is questioned. The mind, of course, will resist this realization. It will try to grasp it intellectually, to turn it into another concept, another belief. But beliefs are just more thoughts. A thought cannot transcend itself, just as a shadow cannot step into the light and become real. The only way to truly see through the illusion is direct experience, not by thinking about it, but by looking at it as it arises in the moment. This is where the simple yet profound practice of stopping comes in. At any given moment, pause. Do nothing for a few seconds. In that stillness, without labeling, without analyzing, where is this I? Does it have a form? Can it be found? Or is there simply awareness, without anyone inside it claiming ownership? Like a room without a guest, experience is still happening, but there is no tenant inside claiming it as mine. The absence of a separate I does not mean lifelessness. It does not mean inaction or withdrawal. In fact, life flows even more effortlessly when there is no imaginary controller. The wind does not ask permission to blow. The sun does not deliberate before rising. The body moves, the senses perceive, thoughts appear and dissolve, all without a central I directing the process. Everything functions just as before, except now without the false burden of authorship. This realization is not the acquisition of a new truth, but the shedding of an old lie. It is the undoing of a mistaken belief that never held any real power to begin with. And once it is seen, life is no longer weighed down by imaginary struggles. Decisions are no longer paralyzed by the illusion of choice, because the one who agonized over decisions was never real. There is no need to seek happiness, because the one who was seeking it was an illusion all along. Some might argue that thoughts do, in fact, have power, that if you believe strongly enough in something, you can manifest it into reality. If a person convinces themselves they are sick, they may develop symptoms. If someone fixates on wealth with unwavering certainty, opportunities may seem to align in their favor. But is it really the thought itself that causes these things to happen? Consider a seed. A seed by itself does not grow into a tree simply because it exists. It requires soil, water, sunlight, and time. A thought is like a seed. It may set something in motion, but only when supported by deeper forces beyond the thought itself. If you dwell on illness, your body responds, not because the thought has power, but because the body and mind are intricately connected. If you focus on success, your actions align accordingly, not because the thought alone creates wealth, but because belief influences behavior, and behavior influences outcomes. But notice, all of this still happens without a thinker. The thought, "I want to be successful," does not by itself create success. Rather, belief shapes perception, perception influences action, and action naturally brings results. The entire process unfolds spontaneously, just as a river carves its path through rock, not because it decides to, but because that is the nature of flowing water. Manifestation does not prove that thoughts have independent power. It only reveals how interconnected everything already is. The mind, body, and world are not separate, but part of the same seamless unfolding. There is no I making it happen, just as a wave does not control the ocean. Everything flows effortlessly, as it always has. Ultimately, there is only presence. This presence is not something to be attained. It is what has always been here, before the I arose, before the mind constructed its elaborate story. It is the silent space in which all thoughts come and go, untouched, unbothered, unconcerned. And in this space, everything is already complete. There is nothing to be fixed, nothing to be achieved, nothing to be understood, because nothing was ever broken to begin with. This is the ultimate recognition that what we are seeking is not elsewhere. It is not in the next thought, the next insight, the next realization. It is not in the future, nor in the past. It is right here, in the absence of the false I that we spent a lifetime defending. When that illusion falls away, what remains is something so simple, so obvious that the mind overlooks it completely. But it has been here all along. It was never hidden. It was never absent. It is what we are. And in this knowing, there is peace. Not the peace of the mind, which depends on circumstances, but the peace of being itself, silent, still, untouched by time. The peace that was here before the first thought ever arose. The peace that remains, even as thoughts continue to dance and dissolve. The peace that is not gained, but simply recognized as having always been. This is the freedom that comes when the illusion of the I is seen for what it is, not an enemy to be fought, not a problem to be solved, but a ghost that never truly existed. And when that ghost is seen through, what is left is the clarity, simplicity, and effortless unfolding of life as it always was, without a center, without a doer, without an I to claim it. Life simply is, and that is enough.